Welcome to your podcast, Leadership is Tricky, where we'll tackle various topics, challenges, and experiences as it relates to your investment in leadership. So, let's design success together. Now your hosts.
Hey everyone, Erick here, back with Leadership is Tricky, or LIT for some folks that are out there. We are back, and I have Trish Martinelli here with me. How you doing this morning, Trish?
I am doing so great. I would never want to be anywhere in the morning but with you, Erick, having some coffee and talking some leadership.
Awesome. And you're out there in Virginia Beach hanging out with a pool next to you and some nice foliage behind you. So folks that don't know, we had Trish on season 1, and we talked a lot about design thinking and some cultural facilitation work that she was doing. But for folks that didn't tune in to season 1 and just getting with us now here in season 3, Trish is the regional director for the National Security Innovation Network, as well as the executive director for the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum. And she's wearing the swag here for those that are looking at the video. She's got her DEF jogger on. And so welcome back, Trish, and welcome back to the audience. So let's just jump right into it. I mentioned it just a little while ago. We talked about design thinking and cultural facilitation work that you've been doing for the last, maybe a couple of years now. Just bring people up to speed with, what you're doing in that space and what it is.
Right. So let's start with design thinking, or DT for some people. Depending on where you work and what you do, you can also kind of hear those echoes framed in user experience or customer experience. So essentially, it is using a methodical process to take a look at the factors that influence decision and design. So, building a persona. If you build a subway, for example, is that a subway that works for the abled body as well as the person that has a physical limitation? Maybe it's sight, maybe it's hearing, maybe it's lower limbs that have a different ability than others. So really looking at what you're building to see if it works and see if it satisfies what the mission is for all of the user cases. And this really taps into something that's uniquely human, our empathy, right, and our understanding of one another, right? So it's not something that is, on the forefront of being replaced by artificial intelligence or machine learning. So that's design thinking. And then cultural facilitation is really allowing people to table what the root issues are that are challenging the way that we work at an interpersonal level. For me, this feels like two sides of the same coin. Like, how do we get the best product or mission fit for what we need to do or what we need to design? And how do we get the very best out of the people that are the unique contributing factor to what we're building, what we're doing, and the mission we have to accomplish?
It's cool, because I think both of them, though, if you really look at its root, it's all about empathy, right? And how we look at problem sets, because typically we like to go these technical solutions and we kind of lose that adaptive piece, that squishy stuff that surrounds while we're doing what we're doing. So I appreciate that. You've been all over LinkedIn lately, even a little bit on Facebook, and you've been all over my timeline. It's kind of something that I did fairly recently as well, but you did a TEDx. So let's talk about that. What was your TEDx about, and what was the topic? And just walk us through that experience, right? For those that are out there that have issues with, speaking in front of large crowds, walk us through the preparation for that, what the topic was, how was that experience for you? And then we'll get into, I'll tease some stuff out as we go along here.
Yeah. Okay, so the title of my talk was Fit to Fight: How Psychological Readiness Enables Mission Accomplishment. And what I really wanted to do, and this is no surprise given that we just talked about enabling the people, right? We wanted to talk about the human factor, and hats off to the Defense Acquisition University. Their TEDx training program and their program really packs a punch. So we wanted to look, my section was looking at the human factor that enables mission readiness. And my piece was about psychological safety. So psychological safety, as it's described by Google's Project Aristotle, which is an amazing study if anybody wants to take a look at
What was the name of that
functioning
project?
teams. Yeah, this is a project by Google. It's called Aristotle. And they really looked at what was common across highly functioning teams, regardless of industry. And they found that the number one thing that made teams really, really successful is psychological safety. And this is how they define that. And that is the individual's perception of the consequences of taking an interpersonal risk at work. So I was just reflecting on this before we met today, and I was thinking of an interpersonal risk that I took that if I had known now what I knew then, would I still take it?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a place where I went to work, and I was assigned kind of a sponsor to help me, get used to the culture and find my way around, the organization. And in my, very first weeks working there, I confided to her, shared with her that I aspired to be a senior executive service member within the next 5 years. I mean, that seemed like something that was very safe to say in places that I had been before. But looking back at that moment, I saw a change in the way that not only she, but other people kind of interacted with me, as if they had to kind of dial me down, put me in my place, and remind me that I wasn't an SES.
Right.
I knew that. But when my inner aspiration got out, see, I took an interpersonal risk and I put out what my goal was, even though it was an audacious, like at that time, just, high reaching goal. I saw reverberations of how I was treated differently once I took that interpersonal risk. And I was thinking about that this morning. Knowing what I know now, would I go back to that moment in time and not, speak my aspiration, even though it was kind of difficult afterwards? And I'm thinking to myself, no, I would still do it because that's true to myself.
Right.
That's true to my goals of putting my vision out there and then, enlisting the willing to help me achieve those goals and striving towards them. If you don't speak it, it's hard to realize it.
So was this person an SES or
No?
Or more of a peer?
Yes, she was a peer.
Yeah, so I have found that throughout my career as well, is that I have to be very, I don't want to say it, cautious with who I share my goals and kind of my roadmap with because of that. Typically, when you share it with your peers, a lot of folks see that as a threat. And, as a minority and, someone in the workplace that doesn't look like others, and you can probably relate to this as well as a female, folks try to find a way to keep you at bay, right? To not pass them. But no, I applaud you. And I'm glad that you have taken that time to reflect. And that you would do it all over again, right? Because I've known you for many years and you're extremely capable. Appreciate you sharing that with me. I just want to throw that out there. So I've seen the same thing in my career as well.
Yeah, I've heard it compared to a Maryland crab pot, where, the way that they catch crabs is they catch them live, and crabs could actually crawl out. They have the physical ability to crawl out, but once one does, the other crabs pull them back down to where they are, because they just, there's something instinctual about we all have to be in this, mess together. So it's interesting, but it's just not me. And I'll kind of flip to one of my favorite kind of Marianne Williamson phrases when she talks about our greatest fear is not that we're amazingly, untalented, but that we're actually very talented. And the part about that quote that I really love is she says, when we shine our light, we allow others to shine their light as well.
Right.
And that's just super important to me. And it's been an organizing principle in the way that I approach interpersonal work.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you went through a course. I guess they got you prepared for the TEDx. So talk about that and how'd you get into that?
Okay, first of all, I'm going to respect both my coach and the master coach. So my coach was Michelle Currier from the National Contract Management Association, a phenomenal human. I'm at her house right now.
Right.
And the second was our master coach, PJ. And both of them like have a very methodical building process. And listen, I'm going to self-identify as someone who doesn't always take the read ahead or the pre-work as seriously as she should. It's a flaw, it's a professional flaw, but it showed up in this process, right? So I was kind of like phoning it in, kind of like half stepping, the prep work. And about halfway through, it started to show. Because this was a layering process, and really, really wise people have been through it before. They designed it on purpose, human-centered design, and they had proven track records and results of how this works, right? So about halfway through, I couldn't fake it anymore. Like I had not done the proper prep work to be at that midway point. And PJ pulled me aside and she said, listen, Trish, we can just take you out of this lineup. Like if you don't want to invest the time, and it's an investment, if you don't want to invest the time, we don't want to put you on stage for you to fail.
Right.
Like you've got to do the work, you've got to do some of this refining, you've got to do some of this practicing. And that shook me, woke me up. And then I started to get on track with the program. So both of those wonderful ladies kind of joke that I did 12 weeks worth of TEDx Prep in 3 weeks flat. So so there's a process where you talk about what your ideas are, you make a first draft, you get some notes and refining, you start to like memorize what your key points are. And PJ calls it the rise and the fall of the conversation, and your call to action. And when I started, my call to action wasn't as clear as it was that day on the stage, 100%. So it's an amazing process. And even for people who may not feel that they're great public speakers. And, I don't know if I think I'm a great public speaker, but I know that I'm comfortable doing it. So if I were to put myself in the shoes of someone who is not as comfortable as I am doing that, I could not recommend a TEDx process more, because it helps you organize your idea. It helps you to tell stories. It helps you to get the point across, and it helps you to get to the so what. And Eric, what do we know about any, proposal that we put forward? If the so what isn't strong, the chances are low.
Right.
And we could be talking about any kind of management principle, whether it's, a facilities improvements or a process overhaul, Sherbert chart.
Sherbert chart, right.
Sherbert chart.
That thing is still alive and well, Yeah.
Yes. So we might have to find the original and or a variant and throw it up so that people on the Lit podcast can see. But, big thinking requires great storytelling. And this is back from the military decision-making process, right? You have to see yourself in the problem first before you can see yourself in the solution.
Yeah, but I think a big part of it too is getting folks engaged, right? And getting those folks that probably haven't thought about the problem as much as you have, to and they're on the fence on whether or not they want to be a part of the solution, right? Is really engaging them. How do you pull them in? And letting them see themselves in the situation, right? So more of that adaptive. I know I always punch home the adaptive leadership piece, but how do we, mobilize folks with storytelling to see themselves in the solution, and push the kind of thought and the concept forward. So you go through this crash course, right, after getting a wake-up call and being called out. So thank you, folks, for calling Trish out.
PJ Jackson. Whoop, whoop. Yep.
Right. So then, right, let's say the last 24 hours before you step on stage, what were you feeling in that moment?
I was feeling very vulnerable, very exposed, because my call to action was based on a hard learned lesson about psychological safety and the difference that it makes everywhere you go. And because, in today's society, we spend more time at work than we spend at any other single activity. Psychological safety at work is not just important to the work, but it's important to the person. when you feel comfortable and safe being your authentic and whole self at work, and understanding that you're not going to be perfect, but when you're imperfect, you'll be treated with compassion, concern, and coaching.
Right.
When that bedrock is solid, it's just so much easier to have a solid foundation in the other areas of your life. And I'll tell you, again, I learned this, when that is shaky, the other areas of your life suffer.
So being vulnerable.
Yes.
Right. And I know you related it back to work, right? And then how it affects everything outside of that. But vulnerability, right? I'm one of those people that I see that people have strength when they're more vulnerable, because they're kind of letting you into, their space. Do you have a challenge with that, just day to day with being vulnerable? Right. I know sometimes I do, based on, trauma in my life and life experiences and to where I'm at. I didn't get to where I'm at by showing a lot of vulnerability, but now that I'm a little bit more mature, and you knew me when I was a lot younger, now that I'm a bit more mature, I'm more comfortable with showing and sharing that vulnerability with others. I don't know, how are you with that?
Well, let me just kind of like put a little pin in that. I have known you for years, and every step along the way of knowing you, I know that you have been destined for greatness.
I
The
appreciate that.
way that you understood the mission, the way that you understood the people, the way that you understood, what was standing in the way between where we are and greatness has shown through at every step of your career. So I don't want to let that slide out there. Like at one point in time, Erick wasn't hot shit, and now he is. But yeah, I mean, always could see you stepping into greatness at every level. So vulnerability. I remember one time when I was first working in Washington, D.C., I had come from an assignment at Wright Pat Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, which I loved. I loved. It was very, the surrounding areas were very earnest and very genuine. And it felt like, a scene right out of, Mayberry RFD. The kids played on the street until midnight. It just felt like very earnest. And when I came to Washington, D.C., I think I brought that same set of like, whole person, allow my emotions to be there, be trusting first, be skeptical second. And I remember someone pulling me aside and saying, look, you're not in Ohio anymore. You need to get hip to how this stuff happens here. And it was in that moment where, there was a voice inside me. And sometimes these voices are very small, especially when they are very true and very challenging. I remember a voice inside me saying, okay, you can change this world, or you can let the world change you. Make your decisions. And at that point, I decided to still be my genuine self.
Right.
And my genuine self is very compassionate, very caring, very empathetic, almost to a fault. And very rarely like, on game, strategic chess player, make the move now for the benefit of the moves, 3 moves later. So I think on some level, I've always been very vulnerable. And you knew me, and we were just talking about this weekend. You knew me when we would be in meetings with a 3-star at the head of the table. And that person would say, are there any questions or comments before we close this meeting? And I would be in the room and I'd be like, I'm sorry, I have a question about what seems to be very obvious.
Right.
Where everyone else had the strategery to know that when that question was asked, the expectation was that no one would say anything. And if you had questions, they happened in the hallway or they happened afterwards. But by being my genuine self in that space, people around me started to see that I was a very strategic thinker. And I went from being an individual contributor, kind of in one function of that organization, to being the deputy chief of the strategic division. And that path was built step by step by asking questions, because I was being genuine to myself. It could have gone wrong. It sure could have. But that particular organization, that group of people, being bold, opened doors for me.
Yeah, and I would probably say even during that time and seeing it firsthand is like, and that's probably what drew me to you, because we're very similar in this fashion, is that we're okay being uncomfortable, right? And sometimes you would ask the questions because you truly wanted to understand, the director's perspective. And a lot of folks, right, because you might ask a question that they didn't have an answer to, but no, it was great seeing your progression, you putting yourself out there, which is vulnerability, right? Is going out there and saying, I don't know, I need clarity, and you live with the results. But yeah, it was a testament to who you are and living your true north, and I appreciated that always. And we would have great conversations about some of the dysfunction and the fact that a lot of folks didn't want to buck the status quo. So, all right. So just going back to your TED Talk, right? So 24 hours before you get on stage, you're feeling vulnerability, probably some anxiousness, and ensuring that you go up there and you don't bomb. So, right, let's say, 15 minutes before you're getting on stage, you've got the microphone, you're 1,000 thoughts going through your head. I bet you if you could see it, it looked like a beautiful mind, right? Right, with all the symbols you've probably never seen in your life out there. Yeah, so you get out there on stage, then what?
Right out of the gate, I stumbled. Like, I misordered some of the first talking points that I had, and I looked over at my coach, and I when I look back at the video, I could see the panic in my eye, and I remember her just going, kind of making this hand motion, like, settle down, it'll be okay. And I got right back on track. And one of the things that I think people may or may not know about TED Talks is, I know it looks like people are just up there talking from their experience, their perspective, kind of like we are now, but there is not a single word that comes out of your mouth during a TED Talk that isn't written down, rehearsed, and memorized.
Right.
I memorized 4 pages of dialogue for that thing. So yeah, I stumbled a little bit out of the gates, but once I saw her kind of give me that hand motion of, I have confidence in you, everything will be okay, we've worked hard, you are prepared, you're here, I got right back on track, and it did feel as natural as a conversation that we're having now.
Awesome. So I will tell you, I'm extremely proud of you, and how far you've come and all the things that you've done. And one of the things that I learned at Harvard is we need to continue to live our purpose, so we'll always live someone else's purpose.
Yep.
And I know for the longest time, these are the things that you wanted to set off to go do to change the world. And I applaud you for that. And everyone will benefit from the work that you're putting in. So I wanted to talk about the psychological safety piece a little bit more.
Yep.
So why do you feel that that's extremely important in the workplace? And then how does that translate outside the workplace?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you have to trust the people you're around, or else you are fighting battles in your mind every moment of every day. And if anyone on this call has ever had a near miss when they're driving, like, somebody swerves, changes lanes, or, you've had to do that to avoid something in the road that you weren't expecting, that feeling. That feeling of your heart racing, your breathing tightening up,
Right.
Everything seems to be in slow motion, you start sweating, that feeling. And here's the thing, science tells us that when you experience those kind of stressful events, day after day, moment after moment, your physiology starts to change. Like, you have heart problems, you have circulatory problems, you have sleeping problems. And if I can tell people one thing that's the most important part of building psychological safety, Erick Ocasio, is to get a solid 8 hours of sleep every night. And no, you cheat on that because you're so frenetic and you have so much stuff going on and in your mind, and you have goals. So don't cheat your sleep anymore.
I got about 4 hours last night, but that's because of jet lag. So
I know this about you, but if you start to honor your body, and see, this is a gift that COVID gave us, is we all had a common traumatic experience of, going through COVID, and we all kind of felt okay talking about our mental wellness. and the balance that we need to keep that mental wellness strong. So yeah, kind of building on psychological safety, you need it wherever you are. It's important to your physiology, to your well-being, to your clarity of thought. And when you talk about leadership, your clarity of thought is critical. If you feel like you are under constant attack, if you feel like everyone around you is going to drag you down into that crab pot, if you feel like you can't speak your highest goals and aspirations, relevant to the mission or even relevant to your person, if you feel like you have to hold that all in, you are changing your physiology, you're changing your body, you're changing the way that your brain is able to comprehend and understand things. And it does nothing beneficial for the mission, and I'm thinking outside of if you are in literally a firefight and kicking down doors. At that point, some of our other kind of, instinctual stuff really needs to kick in. But if we're doing the work of the nation in an office in a predictable fashion, none of those physiological things are benefiting our mission. And that's where it's really important. Like, psychological safety enables mental health, and mental health enables our mission. Secretary Austin has said it, declared it, that mental health is health, period. Stop, pulling out the playbook from the 1960s about mental health and mental wellness and, kind of the mental fatigue that we go through. Stop. We're dealing with 21st century technology. Let's have a 21st century understanding of mental wellness.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I talked about it in our first episode here. So last October, November timeframe, I was at a tipping point because a lot of change was happening in my life and my wife, and we're more comfortable talking about it now, who was, suffering from mental health issues. I wasn't a big believer in it because I wasn't educated on it, right? And it didn't really affect me until it was at my front door. And I had to go out and get educated on mental health and how do you deal with anxiety and what medications are out there and how it changes, someone's physical being. And then how, within a family dynamic, now that we have children, how does that all play into it? And me being, the husband and had to be her foundation and her support. How do I best support her? And I had to get educated. So, I read the books, watched the videos on YouTube. I listened to the podcast. I talked to others that were dealing with it. And then just sitting down, having a conversation with my wife on what are you feeling and what triggers you? And, how can I help you get out of that dark place if you go down that road? And, there's not a lot that I can do from that aspect, but I can see the signs and when she's, getting to that point. And I had to take a step back and take a look at my own mental health and the things that were happening to me because of all the things around me. So a lot of that, I had to cut a lot of people off and out that just weren't conducive to my growth and my well-being. And I'm a lot better for it now because I have time to reflect. I have time to do the things that I'm passionate about, like sitting here with you and having these discussions, but doing it on my timetable, right? I'm not as stretched thin as I used to be. So just wanted to throw that out there for folks as well.
Right. And I'll be really clear, like, so I've had a mental health challenge that started before COVID that I wasn't expecting and wasn't prepared for. So I've been diagnosed with anxiety, and I talk about this in my TED Talk. I've been diagnosed with anxiety. I had a panic attack that was debilitating. And that was the doorway that led me to understand that I needed to care for my mental wellness in a way that I wasn't before. So I will, let me put this out there. I have prepared like a very short, caregiver's guide to people who have anxiety. And if I have a consultancy called The Difference, there is a website called Anxiety with AU. So that's Alpha Uniform. And I have a 5-step, very simple guide. And I was kind of thinking of what to expect when you're expecting the book, when I put this together, because what I found was when I was diagnosed with anxiety, and I think you just exactly said what I found, is that the people around me had no idea of what to do. They didn't know what to do. And frankly, some of the things that they did were very hurtful and counterproductive. And it wasn't because they didn't love me. It wasn't because they wouldn't give me what I needed. It's just that they didn't know what to do because we are not fluent in how anxiety shows up, the impact that it makes, and how people around you can support you. So I've got like a very simple AEIOU and sometimes Y step through of how you can support people in your life that are suffering with anxiety.
No, that's great. I think when I post the episode, we'll drop a link to it or a link to where folks can gather the information that you're providing. So yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no, that's okay. But so that is kind of like when it happens, like when the bomb drops and the shell starts to explode, how do you care for the person in the center of that, crater? So that is the guide that I built. But I wanted to get ahead of that. Left of boom. Does this sound familiar? That used to be, our mission statement, right? Like get left of boom. So before you get there, there are some really important ways that you can protect psychological safety. And, I say this in my TED Talk, psychological safety at work cannot prevent all forms of anxiety, but the lack of it almost always makes any kind of anxiety worse. Right. So we can't prevent all injuries, all, kind of trauma. And, you touched on this as well. We bring in a suitcase of things that have happened to us in the past that have nothing to do with us there at work. So we can't prevent all things, but we can stop the aggravation. And I think back of like the issue of coal miners getting black lung. Coal miners that never smoked got black lung, and coal miners that smoked got black lung. Right. So like, there are some things that we can control and some things that we can't. But if we increase the psychological safety in our workplace, we set a more solid foundation for all mental wellness and mental health.
No, that was well said. And I think it's a great analogy as well with the coal miner piece. So I talk about different, heightened levels of disequilibrium all the time. And we talk about getting to a state in which leadership is about putting people in the unavoidable path of learning, is really taking a look at what are those triggers and things that put people in those levels of chaos and how do you pull them out of it. And part of it's just getting educated and understanding your people and what are those things that put them in that heightened state. So, all right, cool. So let's talk a little bit about DEF. We've probably got about 3 minutes. So let's talk a little bit about DEF and then we'll close. And then if we have to come back for another episode, we will. So,
all right. So the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, DEF, it is a nonprofit dedicated to the people dedicated to national security, whether they're in the Defense Department or the wider national security environment. And what we aim to do is inspire, connect, and empower the members of that national security community to really move forward with creative and innovative ideas. So again, you're going to see a thread from design thinking to culture facilitation to psychological safety to the work that we do at DEF. If you're in an organization, and I've been in one, I've been in more than one actually, but if you're in an organization that says, hey, when we want some innovation, we'll just come over and give you a little shake and you can sprinkle it on our project, that will kill you. Right. Because innovators need watering holes. And there's two different kind of thought processes or mental images on watering holes. One is where you have your favorite beverage in your hand, you're all standing around with your friends, you're bouncing ideas off of each other. Some of them are crazy and get shot down. Some of them are interesting and get some traction, but there's psychological safety, there's trust, and you put new ideas out there and you're enjoying each other's company. Like this the watering hole of that vision could not happen over email or Slack. Right. Because you need to see people's interactions. You need to see the look in their eyes. You need to see the smile on their face. That's one version of the watering hole. The second is imagine the African savanna and there's one pool of water for prey and predator. Innovators can't resist that water of innovation. If they are in an organization and they see a problem and they envision a solution, they cannot resist putting it forward. the same way that both prey and predator have to come to that watering hole and take a sip. So deaf is important to make those connections. And we've had a great track record, a really great track record of being the sandbox or the test kitchen for some ideas that were relevant to the Defense Department that started with us and then boomeranged back into the Defense Department. We've talked a little bit before about Summer of Design and Design Thinking, where during COVID, DEF enabled Summer of Design to train federal employees. And then all those design thinking skills went back into the federal government. Updates, the TSA and Homeland Security have patent protected 3 of the ideas that came out of that. So you want to talk about impact, right? A second one is Project Agitari, and that is the care, support, and professionalism of facilitators, regardless of topic, culture, workplace, etc. And that project started in DEF and is now a standalone project that the top leadership of the Air Force are embracing as a mission multiplier.
So for those, the next one that I'm sorry, for those out there that want to get to you, how do they do that?
Okay, easy. Go to www.deltaechofoxtrotdef.org to check out our events, our offerings, and some of the stuff that we do, or drop me a line at hello@def.org.
Hey, that's nice.
Yep.
Very easy. All right. So yeah, just to stay in true with our time here, but I do want to thank you for coming on. You know, you have been a great supporter of Leadership is Tricky and everything that we've been trying to do with just getting information, bringing people together to share experiences. I do want to say again, congratulations on your TEDx. I can't wait to see the full recording and pump that through our forums and Medium and platform. And then again, I can't reiterate more than that I am extremely proud to know you and everything that you've done. You know, it just warms my heart that you know, there are very strong professional women out there that my daughters can take a look at and see what you're doing out there in your space. So yeah, so for those of you that are just tuning in with us, welcome to Leadership is Tricky, and I hope that you enjoyed the episode. And for those that are return listeners, because we are still getting thousands of downloads a month, so I want to say thank you for supporting us in the 52 countries that we're currently in, and we're still in the top 100 in Peru. I don't know what's happening in Peru, so we'll see what. Yeah, so Trish, I'm sorry. I always like to give our guests the final word. So if there's anything that you want to leave our audience with, go ahead.
So I will leave you with this thought that leadership makes a difference, always does. It is complex, but it's super rewarding. So lead in the way that you have been designed to lead. If it's speaking from a stage, do that. If it's making the most amazing framework for a project to move forward, do that. If it is, in another way, I think about our contracting and acquisition professionals, and they execute an art form that is indispensable to the Department of Defense. Lead in the way that you've been designed and have confidence that you know yourself better than anyone.
Perfect. All right. So thank you for your time today, and thank you to the audience for tuning in.
Thanks, Eric.